Planned Parenthood. The name provokes differing reactions depending on the crowd. But with over 600 health clinics in the United States and more than 2.4 million patients served in 2020 alone, it's hard to deny that Planned Parenthood is at the forefront of accessible American healthcare. The nonprofit organization has secured its place as one of the most accessible sources for various spheres of healthcare as it provides a plethora of useful services. Yet this wasn't always the case for Planned Parenthood, which continues to be burdened with a troubling past. Margaret Sanger founded the organization in 1916 as a pioneer in American birth control. To her, it was a necessary tool for self-governance, but at the time, the American eugenics movement was building momentum. This movement sought to improve the quality of the human race by encouraging the reproduction of fit humans with desirable traits. Sanger has been cited to be inspired by the ableist movement. Planned Parenthood has been doing their fair share of DEI work for quite some time, yet their recent momentum has been partly incited by an increasingly strong sentiment: the atoning of their past. Never in its history has Planned Parenthood been putting in as much weight towards their DEI endeavors as they are now. We spoke to 3 different employees in Planned Parenthood. This included the director of DEI, Jennifer Baxley, and 2 lower-level employees, Nancy Huang, the head of the AEPI ERG, and Megan Molinari, the head of the Disability and Mental Health ERG.
Our organization is 104 years old. We've had a lot of reckoning to do based off of who our founder is, who our founders have been. And Planned Parenthood has historically been seen as sort of like a white feminist organization that's for upper middle class people who identify as only women.
Baxi and her team are targeting the stigma stuck to the organization in hopes of breaking the mold, lacking the intersectionality and critical theory core required to understand the consequences of these biases. So how exactly should something this big and pervasive be combated? Well, Planned Parenthood's executive leadership team has decided that it has to rid itself of its limited viewpoint. It must decenter whiteness in the workplace.
Why we're starting with Black feminism is because, right, we're decentering white women in our work because that's sort of been historically what Planned Parenthood has been seen as. And we know that if we center the needs of those who are most marginalized through the lens of intersectionality, if we center their needs, we center their voices, we center the data, we really think about what are the barriers for that specific constituency when we think about staff experience, employee engagement, all of the things. We can then lift, and if we make fixes, right? If we introduce interventions to support them, we can then lift the boat and the experience for all of our staff, right? Because we know that if Black women benefit and if they win, we all win.
Now, given the scale of the issue, the theory surrounding decentering whiteness isn't all too rare, even if its practice might be. It doesn't mean white workers should be repelled or subdued, but that framing helps understand the issue. It isn't an even playing field. Decentering whiteness doesn't mean putting white people down. It means taking them off a pedestal. Whiteness isn't the white people, it's the supremacy. And any supremacy in action leads to a social hierarchy and works as a defining factor within the company culture. This is why it's so important to tackle the issue head on. The hope is simple. By focusing on undoing harm and making racial equity a structural focus of the organization, they can achieve fundamental change.
Planned Parenthood plans to roll out 3 main policies. The first, an effort to roll out institutionalized framework. Implementing correction when you find something wrong isn't something that happens automatically. In this case, a revision of HR policies is set to focus on searching for and rewriting inequities. The second, installing equity accountability processes. Among these processes, Planned Parenthood plans to install a bias instance response team that follows 2 themes: turning situations into moments of learning rather than immediately resorting to punishment, and working with others to build trust instead of trauma. Lastly, DEI curriculum and future leader training. This curriculum is to be summarized by 5 core staff-focused courses on a quarterly basis. This organization hopes to build a pipeline of future leaders that identify as BIPOC or trans to increase representation and bring often ignored groups into the fold of decision-making. Diversity, in many fronts, is helpful towards the workplace. Variance is helpful in the avoidance of group thinking or being logically restrained in a bubble of similar people with similar mindsets. PPFA will lead to higher diversity, especially informational diversity and social category diversity. In a perfect scenario, this will only increase team relations and performance. Thus, an increasingly diverse organization would also be one with higher synergy and efficiency. Some people are stuck with doubts regarding the efficacy of the upcoming processes.
For me personally, it's not happening fast enough, even if the attention is there.
An ERG stands for an Employee Resources Group, a voluntary employee-led group whose aim is to foster a diverse and inclusive workplace. PPFA, similarly, is utilizing ERGs to promote employee equity and possesses 10 differing ERGs.
We have 10 ERGs at Planned Parenthood, Alliance AAPI ERG, Disability and Mental Health ERG. We have our Forza Latina ERG, Choose a PPFA ERG, MENA ERG, the NBA ERG, PGA, which is the Parents, Guardians, and Caregivers ERG, our Pride ERG, and then we have our Young Professionals ERG. We have MAPA, which is the Men of PPFA. So anyone who is a man or allies who are women who also join because they want a free t-shirt.
In the system, the ERGs act as a more interactive medium for employees to vocalize their concerns and express themselves. In any professional environment, it can feel constricting or isolating to separate yourself from your identity. The purpose of an ERG is to actively listen to employees and their needs and find solutions. By doing such, trust and comfort would develop naturally. There are many benefits associated with active listening. If active listening to and acting on the needs of oppressed employees brings along any of the depicted benefits with the concentration in an oppressed group, the decentralization of whiteness and the direction towards equity and inclusion is succeeding.
John Cotter's 8-step model of organizational change is seen as a constructive tool towards analyzing Planned Parenthood's specified change effort and its efficacy. Let's subdivide into 3 groups just because we can. The first group serves to create the climate for change by creating urgency, which has been used to fix Planned Parenthood's troublesome past, their recent agitation in the fight for equity, and a heightened awareness of the disproportionate power gaps. Next is forming a powerful coalition. PPFA is training executive leadership on the Black feminism praxis, talking about how to use the praxis when making decisions, and making sure the right people are in the room when making these big decisions. Next is creating a vision for change. By determining a set of core values and centering DEI, Planned Parenthood can create a vision closer to their purpose and getting farther from their history. The second group of actions takes advantage of an already developed climate to engage the organization by communicating the vision. Planned Parenthood trains executive leadership who are probably not too cognizant of the issue beforehand. Employee training should be practical and enjoyable to inspire their employees. Continuous evaluations on training efficacy can be used for self-reflection. The next step is empowering action. They evaluate the inequities in decision-making processes, standardize this process to mitigate the risk of inequality, and use this data to further improve upon old decision-making frameworks to ensure it aligns with the vision. Next is creating short-term wins. From our interviews, it is unclear whether Planned Parenthood is celebrating small victories, and this could be problematic as DEI organizational change is hard to accomplish without the feeling of continual progress. The final subdivision works on implementing those interests and sustaining the process through building on the change. Planned Parenthood is developing and creating a 5-year plan for change in the organization. Change isn't just something to do, it's something you have to maintain. An adaptable mindset is highly useful. And lastly, making it stick. It's hard to evaluate whether this organizational change will stick, but data indicates that this change is currently going well, as employee retention rates have increased and turnover has decreased. Should Planned Parenthood be true to their structural adjustments, there's no reason this should fail.
While dealing with such a sensitive and necessary topic, we must optimize the odds of success. One of the issues referenced by various lower-level employees regarding the DEI timeline was that change is not occurring quickly enough.
One of the most frustrating things, especially a big org, is just we want the change now. Not down the road, but now.
We recommend that management creates a more detailed 5-year timeline, most importantly with tangible deliverables and milestones in order to track this progress. Change needs to feel active, even if the prospect is equal either way. In addition to this, we would also recommend implementing a monthly federation-wide meeting in order to explain the progress that has been made on a continental basis and be fully transparent with employees. Ultimately, this action plan will increase communications between the ERGs and ELTs in order to further reduce team conflicts. Implementing this plan connects back to multiple concepts covered within OB. It addresses team decision-making and avoids slippery slope situations. One type of situation that they would want to avoid specifically would be missing multiple deadlines in a row. This is seen in many projects of any kind, as if you miss one deadline, you are more likely to miss the next deadline, especially if it is pushed under the table. Additionally, this plan will also address information sharing in teams by utilizing inquiry decision-making. This will allow for a more diverse set of voices to be heard, as it is more collaborative. Using this will allow them to make decisions that maximize the benefit of the whole organization as a collective, rather than having specific winners and losers. We finally recommend creating a fully anonymous monthly poll system that gauges employees' views on changes that are currently being implemented. Quantitative data makes it easier to understand and analyze trends that are currently happening. After receiving this data, PPFA can create quarterly reports to show their progress. The poll can be structured with questions such as, from 1 to 10, how well do you think PPFA is doing on diversity? And from 1 to 10, how comfortable do you feel taking up your concerns with the DI division or the company? We believe that implementing this survey into PPFA's daily practice will improve DI change by allowing for clearer communication between different teams and levels. This connects to the concepts of giving and receiving feedback. Employees should avoid sugar-coated feedback and instead focus on making their feedback honest and purposeful because the poll is anonymous. When the DEI group receives this feedback from the poll, they should be very explicit about their needs and purpose. They should also specify whether they want coaching, how to do things better, or evaluation on how they did. In PPFA's case, we think they should focus on coaching as they are looking to improve their practices to make sure all their voices are heard.